Hi, I'm Jeff Hajic, and this is the next edition of my continuous improvement tips of the day. And in this one, I want to talk about why you should be thinking simple before complex. And I'll start out by just telling you a little story about one of the projects I was on a long time ago. And in this project, we're working on how to assemble hubs for a particular type of implement, I'll say, just to kind of keep it a little vague. And in the hub, you had to grease up the hub before it was installed. So we used an automated grease machine, 5-gallon bucket of grease, a little gun that you'd insert it, press the button, pack the bearings. So it was a pretty basic thing, but it was a mess. Every time you pulled away, you get a long string of grease that falls. And we tried to figure out a better way to have the handle accessible. So I came up with the idea of just taking a piece of PVC pipe. I cut a slot in it and a little notch to be able to turn the gun to the side and hold it in position. Screwed it down to a 2x4 and then clamped the 2x4 to the workbench. It was a little slope bench, and the hub would kind of roll along in front of it as they were working on it, and it worked perfectly. So we're able to kind of slide it down, grease it, pull it back. At the end of the project, or kind of later in the project, somebody wanted to send it over to tooling and have them create a full-blown metal, really well-designed tool to replace the one that we had built in the project. And I looked over at it and kind of asked them why. And they were a little confused. And I said, well, it's working right now. There's no sign that anything's breaking. If it breaks, we'll know the fatigue points. We'll know where the problems are. We'll know what's done wrong. Plus, we don't know for sure that it works optimally now. We might come up with different changes later. But it's something that's in position. It's simple, and it works now. And we left it there. And 2 years later, I checked on it, and the same thing was still in the place. So the point here is kind of what goes along with this whole lesson of the day. Is you want to start projects basic, simple, and do it the easiest way possible. And then if something doesn't work, or if you find out you're missing something, then you add complexity. So you want to try and make sure that you fight this idea that you have to add more to your project because it's a complex problem or solution is better than a simple solution. And there's this kind of mentality now, as we've evolved all this technology in the world, that we want to use that technology even when it's not applicable. So only add complexity when there's a reason to do it, when something has failed or isn't working the way you want it to. So like in this project I talk about, you begin with the basics, you identify what the core need, and define exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish. And in most cases, what we do is we have a lot of extraneous ideas as we start looking at solutions and think, oh, that'd be nice to have, but it isn't part of what our core requirement is. So if we kind of think about what exactly we need to put in place to make the specific process we are working on better, then we don't get into this idea. So know your core needs. Then you want to make sure that, again, like I talked about in my example, just try something simple. And sometimes the simplest thing you try will work and it'll continue to work. So there's no reason to get more complex. And you just kind of think, is there something basic that we can use to solve this problem? And then finally, you want to always evaluate your results. And like I said, I went back 2 years later, but it wasn't the first time that anybody went back and looked at it. I'd been by it before, but that was the first time I really inspected it. And I saw that it was still out there. But, anybody using it on a day-to-day basis, if there was a problem, they should be telling you about it or doing something about it. And that never happened because it worked perfectly in a very simple state. And then finally, why is simplicity so good for an organization, for a team, for a process? And the reason is that you can do it quickly. So if I had to go into tooling and have them design a couple iterations, and I made this thing and I kind of talked about it quickly, but it wasn't the first take on it. It was an idea. We figured out the slot was maybe a little too narrow or a little too wide, maybe there's too much flop, and we decided where the notch was supposed to be, how far away we had to position it, what kind of clamps we had to use. All these things were little experiments. But still, even with all of that, it's much faster implementation than having to go and make all those mistakes and corrections on a complex tool. So you don't want to go into that stuff right away. You want to be able to implement quickly to make sure things go, that you can kind of iron out the bugs right away. It's also much easier to troubleshoot a simple solution than a complex solution. So if you have a drill press that you're making a single hole in, it's a lot easier to figure out what's wrong than it would be to go through a big CNC machine and diagnose a problem with that. And then finally, if you have a simple solution that's easy to understand and easy to recognize why it is the way it is and what it's doing, it's much quicker in the adoption. Plus, it's just a lot easier to train people on that. So that's why simplicity is much better than complexity, at least in the early stages. Test it out. A lot of these concepts I have here, There's more detailed information at Continuous Improvement Central. If you like this kind of video, like and subscribe if you're watching it on YouTube, and just continue to enjoy it if you're watching it on Continuous Improvement Central already. Have a good day.